If you're still pushing with too many habits, too many podcasts to listen to, too many books to read, too many new ideas, too many dates with your wife, yes, there is such a thing, too much time with your kids, too much time alone, you get to a breaking point because the software is going to start breaking down. You have a certain level of work capacity and you can't blow past that. You have to incrementally move the needle, set the pace. Fast enough to move, slow enough to last. I know I want to move forward, but I have to do it strategically to where I don't break myself, my marriage, my family, or the businesses that I'm building.
I went through some phases of entrepreneurship, and as you mentioned, one of those phases is like probably the one I'm least proud of, and I call it like my people pleasing phase, right? Like where I just, I have a talent at kind of like knowing what people want and what they want me to say and what, you know what I mean? And I spent a lot of time like trying to be everything to everybody, and it was very people pleasing, and it just ran me into the dirt. I was miserable. So anyone who's listening to this podcast, like you said, that's like, oh, that's offensive or whatever. It's like, no, bullshit. Like, look, there's an expert out there for everybody, but I am not the right person for everybody. And I needed to figure that out. And so you're way ahead of the curve from me, it took me a long time to figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. And I'm just now jumping into the Tactical Empire, which has been super fun and cool. But you guys really have created this amazing group of men who are super supportive, and like already like in the private group, I'm seeing these questions and the way that everybody's supporting each other and answering them and everything. And I'm just curious for you, like what led to you like wanting to create that? Something. I mean, it's kind of a newish endeavor, right? Like a year or two, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's being involved in it from this perspective, from the role that I have now as partner and mentor, is about a year for me, but I can't take credit for creating it. This is Jeff's baby originally. About 3 years ago, he went out and created the Tactical Empire. And Jeff was my mentor in another mentor group. And so thankfully I was paired with him because this group had like 25 mentors, and I got on an intro call and I was like, hey, I'll sign up. And they're like, hey, we're going to put you with this guy. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. And so he's been mentoring me for about 5 years now. And then a little over a year ago, about 2 years ago, I joined the Tactical Empire. And so Jeff continued to be my mentor, and I was a client, and I saw what he was doing. And at the end of summer last year, 2023, he gave all the guys like a free 30-minute wrap up the year call. And I was on that call, and we just started talking. And we've always been pretty much on the same wavelength. But in that call, we realized that him and I ultimately have the same mission. And because he mentored me, we truly believe in the same shit. And he was, I don't want to say floating the Tactical Empire along, but he was a one-man band. And he's just a little bit older than me, and he connects with the demographic that's his age and a little bit older, whereas I connect with my age group and a little bit younger. And so we just talked it out, and it was like, hey, I think this is the time where he can bring me on and I can reach a different demographic than him. So him and I doing this together is about a year old. And I appreciate you saying that you've come in and you see the value in what we've created, because as a business owner, like you always try and see the areas that you can improve upon. So I appreciate the words of affirmation. That's my love language. So I do appreciate those words. But we just had a really cool meeting yesterday with me, Jeff, and our 2 virtual professionals. And we basically did a traction EOS meeting, and it was like, where do we need to make the most progress in the next 90 days? And so we're looking at the areas to make this cohort, this network, this group of men even better. I know we have a really good thing going on, but we ultimately want to help somewhere around 100 to 150 men on a regular basis. And, we're just shy of halfway there. So I appreciate the things that you've said about what we've put together. So him and I are super excited about it. The interesting thing is like, Jeff and I have created the lives that we want, right? Like I'm married with 2 kids, and I basically work 2 hours a day, and I work on more than one business within those 2 to 3 hours. And I'm always home in the morning. I'm always home at night. And if I want to pick my kids up early, I can pick them up early. Jeff sold his house in Texas and has been RVing with, him, his wife, 4 kids, and a dog for basically 6 months at least. And they're going to see every state that they can drive to in the next 2 years. And they homeschool their kids. And he's building a business out of an RV. And so what's interesting is, how do we build? This is a rhetorical question. How do we build what we want to build while maintaining what we have? You've met all the business owners that always go for more. So I actually hesitate to say, hey, we're halfway to our goal and we want to grow this thing, but we want to grow it in such a manner to where it doesn't negatively impact the more important areas of our life. Like, our professional life is to help these men in the Tactical Empire, but not at the detriment to our fitness, not at the detriment to our marriage, not at the detriment to our parenting. And I say that with the Tactical Empire, and I also say that with the metabolic gym that I'm opening. Like, I have very clear guardrails that I have to stay between in order to keep what it is that I have, because I know what I have is enough and it's what I want right now.
Yeah, and more isn't better. I think that you've clearly learned that lesson, and that's something, like I was talking about with my people pleasing phase. That was it. I just kept giving of myself, and if someone wanted my time, I gave it to them. It didn't matter when it was or for what reason or whatever. And I think that those clear boundaries that you're talking about, that you and Jeff clearly have, and that you mentor all these men in your group to have, that's powerful, because you can have everything you want without, like, basically selling your soul and giving up. And giving up all of what the other things that you want in your life. It's just, most people don't realize that, because the message, the discourse out there is grind, work harder, work 20 hours a day. You know what I mean? There's there's a message about that, which is just completely bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, that was the message that I followed when I was 20, not married, without kids, when I was a high school teacher trying to leave a $35,000 a year pre-tax job to be like, and it worked for me. But I'm looking back and I'm like, holy shit, like, people are doing that in their 40s with married and 3 kids. Like, what the, and here's the kicker. They may say they want to not work that much, but their actions prove different. They're literally staying at the office an extra 5 hours, when at the end of the day, it's not moving the needle. They're staying at the office for an extra 5 hours and not going to the gym. Like, no, I have to build this business. The payoff is going to be there. No, it's not. Like, we know none of us are going to get to the peak of the mountain. Like, it's all false summits the whole fucking way forever. So when you I don't want to say get comfortable at base camp, but like, when you can recognize that you have what you want or need, and you incrementally define growth. Right? Like, I'm not against growing. I want to grow in all areas, but I've defined growth and I understand my pace. I've been really high recently, and this is the message that I presented on at the last Tactical Empire meetup. We meet in person twice a year. So we have the online group, which is where we connect every single week, but we meet in person. We were at Scottsdale, Arizona last month, and I gave a presentation. It was called Cut the Shit, Master the Basics. And it was all about going back to simplicity. We've all overcomplicated everything in our lives. And so you need to define growth. You need to understand Pareto's principle, what 20% of your actions in all areas of your life are yielding 80% of the results. Take the 20% and turn that into the 80% and allocate the extra 10 to 20% for your new strategy, the new idea. But that should not encapsulate and encompass your whole new schedule. And, one thing that I want to acknowledge here is, like, if you continually improve every area of your life, right? When people look at the Tactical Empire and they're like, okay, the 4 F's, family, fitness, finance, freedom, and we're going to get better at all those every 90 days and blah, 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 blah. And if I get better at all those, my entire life's going to be better. In a short response, yes, but the dichotomy is it's like a machine. A machine may have numerous parts, but if you improve every individual part of the machine, it doesn't mean the machine is better, because what matters is how the parts interact. It's about the software not the individual parts. So you could improve the areas of your family. You can improve the areas of your fitness. You can improve the areas of your finance. You can improve the areas of your freedom. But if you, and we say you are the asset, if you're not good up in your head, if you're still pushing with too many habits, too many podcasts to listen to, too many books to read, too many mentors, too many new ideas, too many, dates with your wife. Yes, there is such a thing. Too much sex to where it's forceful and you're not doing it naturally. Too much time with your kids, too much time alone. Like, you get to a breaking point because the software is going to start breaking down. You're not meant, you have a certain level of work capacity and you can't blow past that. You have to incrementally move the needle. So the biggest thing, and the quote that I had that is resonating with me, is for business owners, high achievers, executives, high W-2 income earners, people who want to improve and get better. My quote for this year, I have annual themes, and the theme for the past 2 years has been the same. It was to be famous in my home, because I spent my 20s building a business. And the first 4 years of my first child, who's my daughter, the first 3-4 years of her life, I wasn't completely present. And so the past 2 years, it was be famous in my home. And that's when I made the big shift to prioritizing family. And I'm there. I don't want to lose that. But this is the first year where I've changed the theme. And the theme for this year, which is what I've been preaching on, is set the pace fast enough to move, slow enough to last.
Yes.
And I think that encapsulates, if that's the right word, encompasses basically what I've done over the past 2 years. Is like, I know I want to move forward, but I have to do it strategically to where I don't break myself, my marriage, my family, or the businesses that I'm building.
Yeah, I think there's so many powerful messages in there that I want to highlight for people who might be listening. One of which, and I recently had so one of my buddies, my Ranger buddies, went on to Delta Force, and I had him on the show recently. His episode's coming out in a week or two. And he spoke to something that you mentioned that I just really want to highlight, is like, the people who are the best at anything in the world really have just mastered the basics. Like, they do the common things better than anybody else. And that's super important, because a lot of people get caught up in this, no, you have to do the sexy things, better than everybody else. And that's really not true. And I think that that's one of the messages I've heard from you and Jeff, like, let's get down to the basics and let's like really get good at those things. And the other message that you're talking about right now, which I think is super powerful, is it's the ecosystem, right? It's, if, as you mentioned, if you get too strong in any one area, and you think, I'm a strength coach, so I think about the ecosystem that is the human body. If your legs get way stronger than your core and your upper body, you're going to start to have problems. Mm-hmm. And so everything kind of has to elevate. If you want to be sustainable and you want to keep that strength going, and in this case, if you're talking about your family or your finances or your fitness or whatever, everything kind of has to slowly level up with it, or something's going to break, you know? Yeah, go ahead.
And so the other thing is, like, you have to test your limits every now and again. And there's lower limits and there's upper limits. So I'm high on this topic of enough. And people think enough means complacency. That's not what I'm referring to. Like, in order to understand where your Goldilocks zone is, let's just use that phrase because people understand it, is you have to have too little of something, and then you have to have too much of something. The example that is relevant in my life right now is my kids only do sports in the fall and the spring. They're only 7 and 4, and it's not this crazy, AAU and all the crazy thing parents are putting their kids in. It's just like, rec stuff. But this fall, we like our kids doing just rec gymnastics 1 day a week, pretty much year round. But when they do a sport, we take them out of gymnastics just because of the schedule and the family. But this is the first season. This fall season was the first season where both of our children were in a sport, because my son's 4. So this is the first year he could do t-ball. He had t-ball. My 7-year-old daughter had soccer. But now in hindsight, the mistake that we made was, this is the first time we kept them in gymnastics. And it was only 1 night a week. And we were like, we're fine. 1 night a week. We got soccer twice. We got t-ball once, and they have their games on Saturday. We'll be fine. It was too much. It was too much. But we needed to go through that season to recognize that. The issue is a lot of people will put their kids in all that stuff and they'll recognize that it's too much, but they won't do shit about it. But we recognized it was too much for our family. So now we're in wintertime. All the sports ended last week. And just even halfway through this week where we didn't have to go to practice on Monday night or Wednesday night, and we just had gymnastics last night, it's like, man, we have so much time to just settle back into our rhythm as a family without having to get home from school and then rush to this next thing, rush dinner, maybe delay dinner till later because we didn't have it prepped or whatever it may be. And so now we can recalibrate. And so me and my wife have already had that conversation. It's like, okay, when springtime comes, we're going to drop gymnastics for 2 months and the kids are going to do their sport and it'll be busier than it is now, but it won't be as busy as the fall. And how can we figure that out? We figure that out because me and my wife communicate about it. We figured that out because in the Tactical Empire, we just put the men through foundational prep for couples annual planning. And so me and my wife haven't done our annual plan for 2025 yet, but the conversation, the foundation of the conversation has already started. What did we do this year? What went well this year? What didn't go as well as we thought this year? And what do we want for the next year? And one of the things is we talk about what the kids are involved in and how it's affected us. And that's, so that's like, take that story and the people listening to this, just implement that into one of the areas of your life. It doesn't have to be about your kids and their athletic endeavors.
Yeah, I think that that failure piece is really important. One of my personal, what I consider my growth value as a person is embracing failure as a part of the growth. And because if you're never failing or you're not making mistakes or there's not things going wrong in your life, then you're probably not pushing hard enough. Like there's a level of comfort that's unhealthy also, like so that failure piece is really important, bumping up against it. And then that piece you just talked about is the biggest part of it, right? Like the failure you don't get anything out of the failure itself as a lesson unless you take the time to reflect on it. You look at it, you examine it, what went wrong here, what are some good things about it, what are some negative things about it, and how can we move forward in a positive, what will we do differently, moving forward. And I'm so glad you talk about that as a team with your wife, as a family, you guys do that level of reflection, which is powerful.
Yeah, I absolutely don't mind the word failure at all. I don't mind the label. The one thing that I have to work with men about is like, especially in today's society where it's either success or failure, because of the school system, like you either passed or you didn't, but that's not how real life is. And like what we teach in Tattoo Empire is like, you shouldn't try and be an A+ student in real life because A+ students have to do all this studying before they take the test. And then they're so worried about the score that defines them. But you want to know who wins the most in real life? The C- student who learns enough to get a C-, takes the fucking test, sees what they got wrong, and then learns what they got wrong. Like that's how the real world works. And so what I try and do with the men is like, I actually don't want them to label most things as failures because all this is it's a situation that didn't work out. And so we've been taught in society that one little thing that doesn't go our way is a failure. And I'm like, no, because like the sun comes up tomorrow and we just move the fuck on. Like there's so many negative connotation and high achievers understand this inherently, which is why we can say, oh, learn from failures. But some people don't respond that way. They're like, oh, I failed. They're labeling themselves instead of the situation. But what you and I, and which is why it's fine that you brought it up, is like we understand that we're not labeling ourselves, we're labeling the situation. So what I want to do is simplify the message for people and be like, that one thing that didn't go your way, it defines nothing in the grand scheme of your life. The question is like, what happens now? What happens next? Yes, of course, extract the lessons and see what you could do differently last time. But this is why we can move on so fast. And in my 20s, the difference between now in my 20s and my mid 30s is like the gap between like situation not working out, a la failure, and me recovering from it, that gap has shrunk. And I could say the same thing about my emotions, right? I'm really big into Stoicism. I read the Daily Stoic every morning. And for those that don't understand Stoicism, they think Stoics are unemotional. That's not what they are. They just understand their emotions and they process them. They try and process them, understand them quicker and process them faster. And that's the other big advantage that's happened in my 30s. I think being married and especially having kids has helped with that because I just really don't have the luxury to like sit around and fucking mull about my feelings all day long. Like my kids need me to go do the next thing for them or teach them how to do the next thing. So I just can't sulk. So, but I still need that alone time to process my emotions, and that gap between shit happening, like, God, dude, like opening this metabolic gym has been super exciting. But there's been fucking hurdles, some outside of my control, which I let them go because that's what I've learned through Stoicism. Some I've been associated with, and I'm like, oh, fuck. But I cut down the time needed to be emotional about the thing and just go right to, well, how do I need to respond about this? What needs to be taken? And so I think those are some of the takeaways. And the differences between, if you don't think you're achieving what you want, if you don't think you're, quote, a high achiever, if you're listening to this podcast, I think you are, because you're seeking things out like this. You're associated with Athan. You either saw him post about this and you thought the title was good enough to listen to, or I shared it and you're in my network. So if you're in either of our networks, you're more of a high achiever than the majority of people. And so I just want you to understand that how you're viewing these things matters the most as opposed to the thing and what happened.